state of affairs and says that is doomed to pass out of existence. Now, I just make the first simple point about this, that how contrary that is to just what we are told every day in the media and in the street. Don't people always say, it'll never change? You can't change that. There'll always be that. There'll always be rich and poor. There'll always be rulers and ruled. Women and men can never be equal. There'll always be racism. There'll always be, because we are taught and indoctrinated that all sorts of things can never be changed. Dialectics starts by insisting on the opposite. I'll just tell a little story here. When I was a teacher at university, I used to have a kind of informal rule with my classes. Actually, force it, but I used to go on about it, which is that in the discussions we're having, you're not allowed to say, it's always. It will always be. I just said, you know, it doesn't matter what it is, you're not allowed to say it. The students used to find it really hard, because they really wanted to say, women will always be oppressed, or you'll always have racism, and so on. They could hardly stop, and we used to joke about it, but, you know, but that's how, this is why the dialectics is such a scandal and abomination to bourgeoisdom and its doctrinaire professors. Now, next point. How does the process of development through contradictions occur? Now, if a single thing, capitalist society, the table, whatever, is a unity of opposites, how does it turn into something else? Through the struggle between those opposite forces. And this goes through a process of quantitative changes leading to qualitative changes. The second key concept of dialectics, the transformation of quantity into qualitative change. What does it mean? Well, the famous example that Engels always used, very simple, I'll repeat it here, was, you know, you heat a kettle of water, and at a certain point, the quantitative change of exciting the molecules in the water through applying heat leads to a quantitative change, the water turns into steam. Right? But that's the sort of basic idea. You can apply it to lots of things. You go through a whole period of time, this is the business of the relationship of continuity to change. You go through a whole period of time when there are small molecular changes occurring in the existing state of affairs, but nothing much seems to change. And then at a certain point, that becomes a tipping point. A balance tips, and you can get qualitative change. Now, think how useful that is from the point of view of understanding social and historical stuff. I think it applies to everything. I think it applies to everything, but it really comes into its own when you think about how society changes. Because that is precisely what happens with the revolutionary transformation of society. You have opposed forces, capitalist class and working class, bourgeoisie and proletariat. They're struggling for a long time within the framework of capitalist society. Nothing much changing. It all seems to be the same, but the balance of forces shifting, long periods of struggle, and then at a certain point, that turns into qualitative change, and the society as a whole changes when one of the forces, working class we hope, overcomes the other force and transforms the society and so on. So that way of thinking is extremely useful. And the next point I think to understand is that this process, it doesn't just apply to the revolutionary transformation of society, it also applies to the various phases and elements within the class struggle and within the struggle to change society. So it's something we can use, when we engage with all the tactical and strategic problems of the movement. And I want to suggest that in this respect, dialectical thinking is extremely useful to revolutionaries. And I just want to conclude by giving some practical examples, some examples of where this way of thinking is especially necessary